What if the worst night of your life turned out to be the beginning of everything you never knew you needed? Picture this: a blizzard, a fight over a taxi, and two strangers forced to share one room, one bed, one impossibly thin blanket. She's a lawyer rebuilding her life after a divorce that shattered her confidence. He's a CEO they call the Ice King, untouchable, unshakable, unreachable. Neither of them planned on that night. Neither expected what happened when the lights went out, and the cold forced them closer than any rule or wall could prevent. But here's the thing about walls. They're built to protect, sure, but they also keep you trapped. And sometimes it takes a snowstorm, a stranger who won't look away, and a second chance you never saw coming to realize that the life you've been protecting might not be the life you actually want. This isn't just a story about romance. It's about two people who'd given up on connection, finding it in the most unexpected place. It's about what happens when you stop running from vulnerability and start running toward it. Because sometimes the person you're meant to find is the one you meet on the worst possible day, in the worst possible circumstances, with nothing between you but honesty and one threadbare blanket. This is the story of Elena and Ethan. One room, one blanket, one night that changed everything. There's something about a snowstorm that strips away all the pretense, you know? It doesn't care if you're wearing a $1,000 coat or if you've got a corner office with a view. When the snow starts falling hard enough, when the wind's howling and the temperature's dropping faster than you can think, well, that's when you find out what people are really made of. Elena Rivera didn't plan on being stuck in the middle of nowhere during a blizzard. She was supposed to be home by now, curled up with a glass of wine and maybe, just maybe, finally getting around to unpacking the last box from her divorce. But life had other plans. Her meeting ran late. The roads turned into skating rinks, and now she's standing on a street corner watching the snow pile up like the universe itself is trying to bury her day. She spots it at the same time he does. A taxi. The only taxi. Its yellow glow cuts through the white chaos like a lifeline, and for a split second Elena thinks she's got this. She's fast, she's determined, and she's wearing boots with decent traction. But then she sees him. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving through the snow like he owns the weather itself. Dark coat sharper than the cold, and a look on his face that says he's never lost anything in his life. Ethan Blackwood, though she doesn't know his name yet. All she knows is that he's heading for her taxi. "Excuse me, that's mine," Elena calls out, quickening her pace. Her breath comes out in frosty puffs, and she's half jogging now, which is not easy when you're dragging a laptop bag and the wind's trying to knock you sideways. He doesn't even glance her way, just keeps walking, confident, unbothered, like she's a gust of wind he can ignore. Oh, hell no. Hey. She's louder now, and this time he stops, turns. And man, the look he gives her, it's not rude exactly. It's worse. It's indifferent. Like she's a minor inconvenience on a day full of bigger problems. "I believe you're mistaken," he says, voice smooth and cold as black ice. I saw it first. Elena's jaw tightens. She's had a long day. A long year, actually. And she's not about to let some corporate ice sculpture steal her ride. Seeing it and earning it are two different things, she shoots back, stepping in front of the cab door. "And I got here first." His eyebrow lifts just a fraction. It's the kind of look that probably makes people in boardrooms sweat. But Elena? She's a lawyer. She's been stared down by hostile witnesses, by judges who thought women didn't belong in their courtrooms. This guy's intimidation tactic? Amateur hour. The standoff lasts exactly 3 seconds before the cab driver rolls down his window, looking between them like he's watching a tennis match. "Look, folks, I ain't got all night. You want to share or you want to freeze?" Share. The word hangs in the air like a challenge. Ethan's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. Calculation, maybe. Or resignation. "Fine," he says, opening the door and sliding in without waiting for her response. Elena stares for a beat, annoyed at his presumption, but the wind picks up and decides for her. She climbs in, slamming the door harder than necessary. The drive is tense and silent. She's pressed against her side of the seat. He's pressed against his. And there's this invisible line down the middle that neither of them dares to cross. The cab smells like old coffee and pine air freshener, and the heater's working overtime but barely keeping up. Silver Pines Lodge, Ethan says to the driver. Elena's head whips around. "Wait, that's where I'm going." He finally looks at her, really looks, and for the first time there's something other than ice in his gaze. Surprise, maybe. or annoyance that the universe keeps throwing her in his path. Small world, he mutters. Unlucky world, she corrects. The driver chuckles, but neither of them joins in. When they finally pull up to the lodge, the snow's coming down so hard you can barely see the building. It's one of those rustic places that looks cozy in brochures but right now just looks like survival. They both head to the front desk, shaking off snow, and that's when things go from bad to worse. "I'm so sorry," the clerk says, wincing like she's delivering news of a death in the family. "We've only got one room left. The storms brought everyone in early and—" "I'll take it," Ethan says immediately. "I booked online," Elena cuts in, pulling out her phone. The clerk checks her computer, frowning. Yes, Ms. Rivera, I see your reservation, but it was for tomorrow night." Elena's stomach drops. Tomorrow. She'd clicked the wrong date. Damn it, Ethan's already reaching for his wallet when she turns to him, desperation and pride warring in her chest. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I need a place to stay. The roads are closed and—" "So do I," he interrupts, but there's less edge in his voice now. He glances at the clerk. "How big is the room?" Well, it's got one bed, queen size, and, the clerk looks genuinely apologetic now. "Due to the power situation, we're rationing supplies. You'd be sharing one blanket." Silence. The kind that's so thick you could cut it with a knife. Elena wants to laugh. Or scream, or maybe both. One room, one bed, one blanket. With a stranger who looks like he's never shared anything in his life. But the alternative is sleeping in the lobby or worse, trying to find another place in a blizzard that's only getting angrier. "Fine," she hears herself say. "We'll make it work." Ethan looks at her for a long moment, something unreadable crossing his face. Then he nods. "Ground rules." "Oh, there'll be rules," Elena agrees, taking the key from the clerk. The room is exactly as uncomfortable as promised. One bed, one blanket that looks like it was made for a child, not two adults, and a tension so thick you could build a wall with it. "I'll take the floor," Ethan offers, though he doesn't sound happy about it. "Don't be ridiculous, it's freezing," Elena says, then immediately regrets it because now it sounds like she's inviting him into bed. "I mean, we're adults. We can handle this." They establish rules. Stay on your side, no touching, no talking. The blanket gets divided with military precision, though it barely covers either of them properly. Elena lies there stiff as a board, staring at the ceiling. She can hear him breathing, feel the careful distance he's maintaining. Minutes tick by. The cold seeps in through the insufficient blanket, through the old windows, through everything. She's just starting to drift off when the lights flicker once, twice, and then die completely. Great. Perfect. Of course. In the darkness, the cold intensifies immediately. Elena pulls the blanket tighter, but it's useless. She's shivering now, teeth starting to chatter, and pride only keeps you warm for so long. "You're freezing," Ethan's voice cuts through the dark. "It's not a question. I'm fine," she lies, but her voice shakes with the cold. She hears him sigh, then move. Before she can protest, she feels warmth, his arm coming around her, pulling her back against his chest. Not romantic, not intimate. Pure survival. "Body heat," he says simply. It's practical. Elena should protest. Should push him away. Should hold on to that wall they've built. But the warmth is immediate and undeniable. And her body makes the choice before her mind can. "Just for warmth," she whispers. "Just for warmth," he agrees. But here's the thing about proximity. About breaking down walls even for practical reasons. Once you cross that line, even with the best intentions, something shifts. Elena can feel his heartbeat against her back, steady and strong. Can smell something clean and cedar-like on his collar. And worst of all, she feels safe in a way she hasn't felt in months. Neither of them sleeps much that night, though neither admits why. And when morning comes, when they separate with awkward efficiency and too careful politeness, something's already been set in motion, something neither the cold nor distance nor all their rules can quite freeze out. They part ways at checkout without exchanging numbers, without promises. Two strangers who shared a storm, but Elena can't quite shake the feeling that she's going to see him again. Life has this funny way of making you eat your words, doesn't it? Just when you think you've closed a chapter, when you've convinced yourself that strange night in the snow was nothing more than a weird blip in your timeline, boom. The universe laughs and throws you right back into the fire. Elena Rivera straightened her blazer for the third time in the elevator. She'd done her homework on Blackwood Capital. Who hadn't? It was one of those corporate giants that either made you or broke you and their legal department. Top tier. Prestigious. The kind of place that could resurrect a career that had taken a few hits during a messy divorce. She needed this. Not just the job, though the paycheck would be nice, but the validation. The proof that she was still sharp, still capable, still someone worth betting on. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open to reveal a reception area that screamed power and money. Glass, steel, and that particular kind of silence that comes from people who are too important to waste time on small talk. Ms. Rivera? A woman in a crisp white shirt appeared, clipboard in hand. They're ready for you. Conference room C. Elena followed, her heels clicking against the marble floors. She'd prepared for this. Researched every major case Blackwood Capital had touched in the last 5 years. Memorized their corporate structure. She had talking points, case references, and enough confidence to fake it till she made it. What she didn't have was a plan for walking into that conference room and seeing him sitting at the head of the table. Ethan Blackwood. No. No. Oh no. He looked up the exact moment she walked in, and Elena watched his expression shift through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds flat. Surprise, recognition, something that might have been amusement, then back to that controlled neutral mask he wore like armor. Ms. Rivera, he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered. Smooth, cool, professional. Like they hadn't spent a night pressed together sharing body heat. Please, have a seat. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Elena's brain was screaming, but her body went into autopilot. She sat, smiled, nodded at the other 3 people on the panel, none of whom mattered because all she could focus on was the fact that the stranger from the blizzard wasn't a stranger at all. He was Ethan Blackwood. The Ethan Blackwood. CEO, the one they called the Ice King in business magazines. The man whose signature could make or break billion-dollar deals, and she'd argued with him over a taxi. Shared a bed with him, woken up with his arms still around her. Focus. Elena, focus. We've reviewed your resume, one of the other panelists was saying. Victoria something, senior counsel, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Impressive credentials, though I noticed there's a gap in the last year. There it was. The question Elena had been dreading. The divorce gap. The period where she'd been too busy putting her life back together to worry about climbing ladders. But before she could answer, another voice cut in. A younger guy, Marcus, the general counsel. Actually, before we dive into background, I want to hear how you'd handle something current. We've got a situation. Elena leaned forward, grateful for the redirect. I'm listening. North Axis Technologies, Marcus said, sliding a folder across the table. We're in the middle of acquiring them. Or we were until their competitor filed for an injunction yesterday. Claims we're violating antitrust regulations. The hearing's in 4 days and our outside counsel just dropped the ball. Hard. Elena opened the folder, her eyes scanning the documents. She could feel Ethan watching her, but she didn't look up. Couldn't. She needed to focus on what she did best, seeing the angles nobody else saw. They're using the Morrison precedent, she said after a moment, flipping through pages. Trying to argue market concentration. But that's not your real problem. Oh? Victoria's tone was skeptical, almost condescending. And what is our real problem? Elena looked up, meeting her gaze. Your real problem is that you're playing defense. They filed in the Southern District deliberately. Judge Hendricks has a history of granting preliminary injunctions in antitrust cases. But if you look at the actual market data, she pulled out a page pointing. North Axis operates in 12 different sectors. Your competitors only in 3. They don't have standing to claim market harm in most of them. The room went quiet. Elena could see the gears turning in their heads. You're suggesting we go on offense, Marcus said slowly. I'm suggesting you flip the board, Elena corrected. File a motion to dismiss based on lack of standing. Then counterfile for tortious interference because that injunction, it's costing you millions a day in deal financing. Make them defend their right to even be in this fight. Ethan leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since she'd walked in, she saw something crack through that ice. Respect, maybe. Or interest. That's aggressive. That's winning, Elena countered, looking directly at him now. Your outside counsel played it safe. Safe lost. I don't play safe, I play smart. The meeting shifted after that. They weren't interviewing her anymore. They were strategizing with her. Elena walked them through approach angles, case law, even which associate to put on research duty, based on the skill sets listed in their directory. By the time they wrapped, 2 hours had passed, and Elena had basically orchestrated their entire legal strategy for the North Axis situation. "We'll be in touch," Victoria said, but her tone had changed, less dismissive, more careful. Elena gathered her things, expecting that to be it. But as she reached the door, Ethan's voice stopped her. "Ms. Rivera." A word? Her stomach flipped, but she turned, professional smile in place. The others filed out, leaving them alone in the conference room that suddenly felt way too small. "That night," he started, "was a coincidence," Elena cut in quickly. "A strange situation that has nothing to do with this." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Agreed. So let's be clear. If you take this job, it's because you earned it. It's not because of anything else." "I wouldn't accept it any other way," she said firmly. Something like approval flickered across his face. "Good, because the North Axis hearing? It's yours. You want to prove you belong here? Win that case," Elena blinked. "I don't even have the job yet." "You do now," Ethan said simply. "Report Monday. You'll work directly with Marcus, but the North Axis case reports to me. Don't make me regret this." He walked out before she could respond, leaving Elena standing there with a job offer that felt more like a challenge. And maybe that's exactly what it was. Monday came fast. Elena hit the ground running, pulling 16-hour days building their case. The North Axis situation was worse than she'd thought. The injunction was solid, the judge was hostile, and their competitor had deep pockets funding an army of lawyers. But Elena? She'd been underestimated before. She knew how to turn that into a weapon. The hearing was a bloodbath in the best way possible. Elena stood in that courtroom and systematically dismantled every argument the opposition made. She had case law they didn't see coming, market data that contradicted their claims, and a cross-examination style that was surgical in its precision. When Judge Hendricks denied the injunction and dismissed the complaint with prejudice, Elena felt the victory in her bones. Not just because she won, but because she'd reminded herself who she was, what she was capable of. Back at the office, the congratulations were polite but genuine. Marcus clapped her on the shoulder. Victoria gave a tight nod that might have been approval. And Ethan? He was in his office when she walked past and their eyes met through the glass. He raised his coffee cup in a silent salute, and Elena saw something there she hadn't expected. Recognition. Not of her as the woman from the blizzard, but as an equal. As someone who belonged in his world, Elena nodded back, then kept walking. But as she settled into her new office, actual office with a window and everything, she couldn't shake the feeling that winning the case was just the beginning. Here's what nobody tells you about working with someone you've got history with, even weird one night in a blizzard history. Every interaction becomes this dance of what you acknowledge and what you pretend never happened. Elena and Ethan had become masters of the pretend game. In meetings, they were all business. Curt nods. Professional distance. He was the CEO, she was the attorney who'd proven herself invaluable after the North Axis win. Clean lines. No complications. Except nothing's ever really that clean, is it? 3 months in, Elena had carved out her place at Blackwood Capital. She wasn't just the new hire anymore. She was the one people came to when cases got messy. The one who saw angles others missed. And yeah, maybe she worked a little harder, stayed a little later, pushed a little more than necessary. But that's what you did when you were rebuilding. Rivera. Marcus poked his head into her office, looking frazzled. "We've got a problem with the Meridian merger. Environmental compliance issues popped up in Colorado. Ethan wants someone on site tomorrow to assess the situation before the investors freak out." Elena looked up from her brief. "Tomorrow? That's short notice, I know, but you're the one he asked for." Something fluttered in her chest that she immediately shut down. Professional. This was professional. "Fine. Send me the details." "What?" Marcus didn't mention. And what Elena discovered at the airport was that Ethan was going too. Something about investor relations and showing executive commitment to due diligence, which meant 6 hours on a corporate jet trying very hard not to remember what it felt like to wake up in his arms. The flight was fine. Cordial. They reviewed documents, discussed strategy, kept everything firmly in the lane marked colleagues. Elena could do this. She was good at compartmentalizing. The site inspection took all day. Mountains, pipelines, environmental reports that read like someone had tried very hard to hide the truth. By evening, they'd gathered enough evidence to know the merger needed serious renegotiation. The hotel was nicer than Silver Pines, at least. Modern, clean. 2 separate rooms with actual heat and presumably more than 1 blanket per room. Elena dropped her bag, kicked off her heels, and was about to order room service when someone knocked. She opened the door to find Ethan, tie loosened, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him at the office. "Dinner?" he offered. "There's a decent restaurant downstairs, and we should discuss tomorrow's approach. Work dinner. Safe. Give me 10 minutes. The restaurant was quiet, intimate in that way that made Elena hyper-aware of every detail. The candle on the table. The wine list he didn't consult her on before ordering something that turned out to be perfect. The way conversation about environmental compliance somehow drifted into something more personal. "You were married," he said. Not quite a question. It was there in her file, she supposed. The gap Victoria had asked about. Was being the operative word, Elena confirmed, taking a sip of wine. "Turns out marrying your law school sweetheart sounds romantic until you both become lawyers who care more about winning arguments than understanding each other." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand that more than you'd think." "Yeah?" She studied him. "I don't see a ring." "Came close once. Long time ago." He swirled his wine, and for a moment the Ice King facade cracked. "Turns out building an empire and building a relationship require different skill sets. I was only good at one." There was something vulnerable in that admission, something that made Elena see him differently. Not as her boss, not as the stranger from the blizzard, just as a person who'd made choices and lived with the consequences. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Some days." He met her eyes. "Do you?" "The marriage?" "No. The fact that I let it make me doubt myself?" "Yeah. That I regret." They talked until the restaurant started clearing out, until the staff was politely hovering with that "we'd like to close" energy. The conversation had drifted through careers, childhood, the weird pressure of always having to be the smartest person in the room. By the time they headed back upstairs, something had shifted between them. Not romantic exactly, more like recognition. 2 people who'd been wearing armor for so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to take it off. Elena was almost to her room when the lights flickered. "Oh, you've got to be kidding. Please tell me that's not—" she started. The lights flickered again, then died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the hallway in dim red. "You've got to be cursed," Ethan said, and she could hear the smile in his voice even in the darkness. "Me? You're the one who was there both times." A staff member hurried down the hall, flashlight bobbing. "Terribly sorry, folks. Storm took out a transformer. Power should be back in a few hours. We're bringing up battery lamps to all the rooms." A few hours. In the dark. Again. Elena unlocked her door, then paused. "I've got my laptop. Battery's full. If you want to actually work on that strategy instead of sitting in the dark." It was practical, professional, and absolutely not an excuse to not be alone. Ethan hesitated for just a second, then nodded. Practical. Exactly. Her room was just as dark as the hallway, but she found her laptop and its screen cast enough light to see by. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, pulled up documents, and for about 20 minutes actually discussed Meridian merger strategies. But then Ethan said something about his first big deal, and Elena shared a story about her worst courtroom disaster, and suddenly they weren't talking about work anymore. They were talking about real things, the kind of things you don't usually share with your CEO. "My dad died when I was 14, Ethan said quietly, his face half lit by the laptop glow. "Heart attack. One day he was teaching me chess. Next day he was gone. My mom, she didn't handle it well. Checked out emotionally. So I learned pretty quick that feelings were a luxury I couldn't afford. You build walls. You focus on what you can control. Elena felt something tighten in her chest. That why they call you the Ice King? Among other reasons. He looked at her. What about you? What's your story? She thought about deflecting, about keeping up her own walls. But something about the darkness, about the way this kept happening between them, twice now, powerless and honest, made her want to try something different. My ex told me I was too ambitious, she said, that I cared more about my career than our marriage. And maybe he was right. But also, I think I just wanted to matter, to build something that was mine. He saw that as competition instead of partnership. That's his failure, not yours, Ethan said firmly. Maybe, but it still makes you wonder if you're capable of both, success and connection. Yeah, he said softly. It does. They sat in the darkness, the laptop battery slowly dying, and Elena realized something. This was the most honest conversation she'd had in years. Not performing, not proving, not pretending, just two people being real with each other. When the laptop finally died, plunging them into complete darkness, neither of them moved. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the opposite, like they'd found some strange pocket of space where all the usual rules didn't apply. Elena, Ethan said, his voice quiet in the dark. That night at Silver Pines. Changed things, she finished. I know. But we can't. I know that too. The power came back an hour later, sudden and jarring. They both blinked in the brightness, the spell broken. Ethan stood, professional mask sliding back into place. I should go. Early start tomorrow. Right, of course. He paused at the door, looked back. Thank you. For tonight. For listening. Anytime, Elena said, and meant it. After he left, Elena lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying not to think about how easy it had been to talk to him, how natural it felt, how dangerous that was. Because here's the thing about walls coming down. Once they start cracking, it's almost impossible to stop them from crumbling completely. Victory parties at Blackwood Capitol weren't like normal office celebrations. They were events, the kind where champagne flowed like water, where business deals happened in corners, and where everyone dressed like they were attending the Met Gala, instead of celebrating a merger closing. The Meridian deal had gone through. After weeks of renegotiation, environmental assessments, and legal gymnastics that would have made most attorneys quit, Elena had pulled it off. Ethan had personally thanked her in the company-wide email, which was basically his version of a standing ovation. Now here she was, in a dress she'd panic-bought that afternoon, trying to look like she belonged among people who considered casual wealth an oxymoron. You clean up nice. Rivera, Marcus said, appearing with 2 champagne flutes. Didn't think you owned anything that wasn't a power suit. I contain multitudes, Elena said dryly, accepting the glass. Though I'm counting the minutes until I can go home and put on sweatpants. Don't leave too early. Ethan's supposed to make a speech. Rumor has it you're getting a special mention. Great. Nothing like being put in the spotlight when all you wanted was to grab some fancy appetizers and disappear. The ballroom was stunning. All glass and city lights, a live band playing jazz standards. People networking with the intensity of sharks circling prey. Elena spotted Ethan across the room, surrounded by investors and board members looking every bit the king of his empire. Dark suit, perfect posture, that controlled expression that gave away nothing. Their eyes met for a second. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, and she felt that familiar flutter she'd been trying very hard to ignore for months now. Professional, Elena. Keep it professional. The speech happened. Ethan praised the team, highlighted the deal's significance, and yes, called out Elena specifically for her strategic brilliance and unwavering dedication. The applause was genuine, and for a moment she let herself feel proud. Not despite everything she'd been through, but because of it. What happened next, though, that she didn't see coming? The band shifted into something slower, romantic. People paired off, heading to the dance floor. Elena was planning her escape route when a voice beside her said, "Dance with me." She turned. Ethan stood there, hand extended, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I don't think it's a company party. Colleagues dance. It's normal." But there was something in his voice that suggested he knew it wasn't normal at all. Not for them. Elena should have said no, should have made an excuse, should have remembered every reason why this was a bad idea. Instead, she took his hand. The dance floor was crowded enough that they weren't the center of attention, but the moment his hand settled on her waist, the moment she placed hers on his shoulder, Elena became hyper-aware of every point of contact. This was different from that night in the snow. That had been survival necessity. This was choice. "You did good work on Meridian," Ethan said quietly as they moved. "Really good." "Just doing my job," Elena replied, but she was distracted by how well they fit together, how natural this felt. It was more than that. "You saved that deal. Everyone knows it." They swayed in silence for a moment, and Elena became aware of people watching. Not obviously, but that corporate side-eye thing where everyone's pretending not to notice while absolutely noticing. "We're creating gossip," she murmured. "Let them talk," Ethan said, and there was something almost defiant in his tone. "I'm tired of pretending," Elena's heart stuttered. "Pretending what?" He looked at her then. Really looked, and the ice was gone. Completely. "That I don't think about that night, either of them. That I don't look for you in every meeting. That having you close and keeping you at a distance isn't the hardest thing I do every day." Oh no. Ethan," Elena started, but she didn't know how to finish, because she felt it too, had been feeling it, and pretending she wasn't, had been exhausting. The song ended. They separated, the moment breaking. But the damage, or maybe the revelation, was done. Elena excused herself, needing air, needing space to think. She found a quiet hallway, leaning against the cool wall, trying to sort through the chaos in her head. That's where Victoria found her. "Quite the performance out there," Victoria said, her smile sharp as glass. "Though I have to wonder if your success rate is more about your legal skills or your personal rapport with the CEO. Elena's blood went cold. "Excuse me." "Oh, don't play innocent. Everyone saw that dance. Saw the way he looks at you. Must be nice having that kind of advantage." Victoria stepped closer, voice dropping to a poisonous whisper. "But here's some free advice. Office romances with the boss? They never end well. And when they crash, it's never the powerful man who pays the price. It's always the ambitious woman who gets labeled as the one who slept her way to the top." She walked away, leaving Elena standing there with her words echoing like accusations. The worst part? Victoria wasn't entirely wrong. Not about the consequences, anyway. Elena had worked too hard, rebuilt too much to have her reputation destroyed by gossip and speculation. She left the party without saying goodbye. The next week at work, Elena became a ghost. She took meetings remotely when possible, communicated through emails, and when she absolutely had to see Ethan, she was professional to the point of coldness. No eye contact, no small talk. Just facts and strategy, and nothing that could be misconstrued, Ethan noticed. Of course he noticed. She caught him watching her in meetings with an expression that was half confusion, half hurt. He tried to corner her once in the hallway, asked if everything was okay, if he'd done something wrong. "Everything's fine," Elena lied. "Just busy, but it wasn't fine." And the distance she was creating felt like cutting off a limb, necessary for survival, but agonizing nonetheless. Marcus mentioned it casually one afternoon. "You and Blackwood have a falling out?" "He's been in a mood all week." "We don't have anything to fall out over," Elena said firmly. "We're colleagues. That's all." She almost believed it herself. But at night, alone in her apartment, Elena wondered if protecting her reputation was worth this hollow feeling. If playing it safe meant never taking the risk that might actually lead somewhere real. And across the city, in a corner office overlooking everything he'd built, Ethan stared at the skyline and wondered when doing the right thing had started feeling so much like giving up. There's a specific kind of nightmare that comes with seeing your name in a headline you never asked for. Elena discovered this on a Tuesday morning when her phone started buzzing before her alarm even went off. Text from Marcus. "Don't read the blogs," which, of course, meant she immediately read the blogs. Blackwood's secret weapon, how a mystery lawyer went from taxi fight to top legal counsel. Her stomach dropped. The article was on one of those business gossip sites that lived for drama, the kind that mixed fact with speculation and called it journalism. And this one? It had details. The blizzard, the shared taxi, the romantic beginning that allegedly explained her meteoric rise at Blackwood Capital. Someone had talked, or seen, or put pieces together in the worst possible way. By the time Elena got to the office, the story had spread like wildfire. She could feel eyes on her in the elevator, hear the whispers that stopped when she walked past. Professional respect she'd earned over months was evaporating in real time, replaced by speculation and judgment. "Is it true?" asked Jennifer from contracts, her voice pitched with that fake concern that's really just gossip hunting. "You and Mr. Blackwood knew each other before?" "We shared a cab during a storm," Elena said flatly. "That's it. Now if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do." But it didn't stop. More articles appeared. Tabloids picked it up, spinning tales of secret romance and corporate favoritism. One particularly vicious piece suggested every win she'd had, North Axis, Meridian, all of it, was because of personal connections rather than professional merit. Elena wanted to scream. Or cry, or maybe punch something. She'd worked so damn hard to rebuild her credibility, to prove she belonged here on her own terms. And now some gossip columnist with a deadline and no ethics was tearing it all down with innuendo and half-truths. She considered quitting. Seriously considered it. Walking away before the damage got worse, before her reputation became permanently linked to scandal rather than skill. That's what she was thinking about, staring at a resignation letter she'd half-drafted, when her office door opened without a knock. Ethan walked in, closed the door behind him, and the look on his face was something she'd never seen before. Not ice, not control, anger, pure, focused, protective anger. "I'm handling this," he said without preamble. Elena blinked. "What? The articles? The rumors, all of it?" "I'm handling it." "Ethan, you can't, it'll just make it worse." "Acknowledging it gives it oxygen. Ignoring it lets them define the narrative," he countered. "And I'm not letting anyone rewrite what you've accomplished here." Before Elena could argue, he was gone. And she had no idea what handling it meant until her phone exploded an hour later. Ethan had called a press conference. Not through PR, not through carefully worded statements. He'd personally stood in front of cameras and journalists and set the record straight in a way that was so unprecedented, so against every corporate playbook, that it made international business news within minutes. Elena watched the video on her computer, hands shaking. "Let me be absolutely clear," Ethan said, his voice carrying that CEO authority but with something else underneath, something fierce. "The articles circulating about Ms. Rivera are not just inaccurate. They're insulting to a brilliant attorney who has earned every victory on merit alone. Yes, we met during a blizzard last year. We shared a taxi and a hotel room because those were the only options available during an emergency." That's where the story ends, he paused. And the camera caught something in his expression that made Elena's chest tighten. What those articles fail to mention is that Ms. Rivera saved the North Axis acquisition with a legal strategy that 3 outside firms couldn't develop. She restructured the Meridian deal when it was days from collapse. She has won every case she's touched not because of who she knows, but because she's exceptional at what she does. And anyone suggesting otherwise isn't just wrong. They're showing their own inability to recognize talent when it doesn't fit their preconceived narratives. The questions came rapid fire after that. Journalists smelling blood in the water, asking about their relationship, about favoritism, about whether he was protecting her for personal reasons. "Ms. Rivera doesn't need my protection," Ethan said firmly. "She needs and deserves professional respect. The kind of respect we'd automatically give a male colleague with her track record. The fact that she's being scrutinized for a coincidental first meeting rather than celebrated for her achievements tells you everything you need to know about the biases still operating in corporate America." He fielded a few more questions, then ended with something that made Elena's eyes sting with unexpected tears. "Here's what I know. I hired Elena Rivera because after one meeting, it was clear she was the best person for the job. Every day since has proven that decision correct. If you want a story, write about how she's one of the most talented attorneys I've ever worked with. That's the truth. Everything else is noise." The conference ended. The internet exploded. Some praised his defense, others criticized the optics, but the narrative had shifted. He'd staked his reputation, his carefully controlled, notoriously private reputation, on defending hers. Elena sat at her desk, staring at the screen, trying to process what had just happened. Nobody had ever stood up for her like that. Not her ex-husband, not her previous firms. Nobody. Ethan had walked into the fire for her, publicly, deliberately. Her phone buzzed. A text from him. "My office, please." She walked through a building that felt different now. People weren't whispering anymore, or if they were, it wasn't with the same judgmental tone. Some nodded respectfully. A few even smiled. Ethan's office door was open. He stood by the window, tie loosened, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. "That was stupid," Elena said from the doorway. He turned. "Probably. You just made yourself part of the story. They're going to analyze every interaction we have now. Let them." "Ethan, I meant every word, Elena." He crossed to her, and his expression was so open, so unguarded, it made her breath catch. "I'm tired of pretending I don't care. Tired of letting you pull away because you're afraid of what people might think. You've been hiding from me for 2 weeks, and I've been trying to respect that. But then this happens, and I realized I can't. I won't watch you get torn down for something that isn't even true." What if it was true? The words slipped out before she could stop them. What if there was something between us? Would you have still defended me? "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Because your work speaks for itself. Because you earned your place here. And because anyone who knows you for 5 minutes can see you'd never compromise your integrity for any relationship." Elena felt something crack open in her chest. All those walls she'd built, all that protection she'd wrapped around herself. "You didn't have to do that. Risk your reputation for mine." "Yes, I did," Ethan said quietly. "Because you matter, Elena, not just as an attorney, as a person. And I'm done pretending that's not true." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they'd been avoiding saying. Outside the window, the city hummed on, indifferent to the shift happening in this one office. "I don't know how to do this," Elena admitted. "How to be good at my job and good at letting someone in. I've failed at that before." "So have I," Ethan said. "Maybe we figure it out together." It wasn't a declaration. Wasn't even a promise, really. Just an offer. A possibility. The kind that required courage instead of caution. Elena thought about Victoria's warning. About all the ways this could go wrong. About the risks and the gossip and the complications. And then she thought about Ethan standing in front of cameras, staking everything on defending her truth. Sometimes the safest choice isn't the right one. They say you can't go back. That returning to where something started is just a way of chasing ghosts, of trying to recapture something that only existed in a specific moment, under specific circumstances. Ethan Blackwood had never been one for sentimentality. But here he was, 3 months after the press conference that changed everything, planning something that was either brilliant or completely insane. Maybe both. Things had shifted between him and Elena after that day in his office. Not dramatically, they hadn't jumped into anything reckless. But the walls had come down. Conversations lingered longer. Coffee breaks happened more frequently. And yeah, there'd been a dinner. Then another. Dates that neither of them called dates but absolutely were. They were careful. Professional at work, personal outside of it. The gossip had died down after his public defense, replaced by respect for how they handled themselves. Victoria had even grudgingly admitted Elena deserved her position, which was basically a peace treaty in corporate speak. But Ethan wanted more than careful. More than the compartmentalized version of whatever this was becoming. And he'd realized something important. Elena had spent so long protecting herself, building walls to prevent getting hurt again, that she needed proof. Not words. Proof that he was all in. So he'd made a call to Silver Pines Lodge, booked a room. The same room, actually, though the manager had been confused about why that mattered. Getting Elena there without spoiling the surprise had required some strategic maneuvering. He'd told her they needed to scout a location for a potential corporate retreat. Which wasn't entirely a lie. Just not entirely the truth either. Now they were in his car, driving through familiar roads as snow began to fall. Not a blizzard this time, just gentle, persistent flakes that made the world look softer. "This feels familiar," Elena said, watching the landscape. There was something in her voice, recognition mixed with curiosity. Does it? Ethan kept his expression neutral, but his heart was doing something complicated in his chest. When the Silver Pines Lodge came into view, Elena turned to look at him, eyebrows raised. Ethan, what are we doing here? Scouting, he said innocently, parking the car. Uh-huh. And this has nothing to do with the fact that this is where we first met? He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that he seemed to save just for her. Can't get anything past you, counselor. The lodge looked different in daylight, less desperate and more charming. Warm lights glowed from windows, smoke curled from chimneys, and the whole place had this storybook quality that made you believe in second chances. They checked in, Elena shooting him suspicious looks the entire time, and when the clerk handed over the key, Ethan saw her expression shift from confused to something softer. Room 7, Elena read off the key. Ethan, this is the same room, he confirmed. Come on. He led her upstairs, unlocked the door, and watched her face as she stepped inside. The room had been transformed. Candles everywhere, safe battery-operated ones, but the effect was the same. Soft music playing from a speaker, and on the bed, laid out carefully, was a single blanket. The thin, inadequate kind they'd shared that first night. Elena pressed her hand to her mouth, and he saw her eyes go shiny with tears she was trying not to shed. What is this? She whispered. Ethan moved to stand in front of her, taking her hands in his. His heart was pounding. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals with less nervousness than this moment required. That night, he started, when we ended up here, I spent the whole time trying to maintain distance, trying to follow rules and stay professional and not acknowledge what I felt the second you argued with me over that taxi. Elena laughed, watery and surprised. You felt something then? I felt everything then, Ethan admitted. You were fierce and sharp and refused to back down, and I remember thinking, who is this woman and why can't I stop looking at her? And then we were stuck in this room sharing this ridiculous blanket and you fell asleep against me and I thought, I'm in trouble. You could have fooled me, Elena said. You were so cold the next morning. Because I was terrified, he said simply. I'd spent years building walls, convinced that caring about someone meant losing focus, losing control. And you threatened all of that in one night. He squeezed her hands, grounding himself. When you walked into that interview, when I realized the woman from the blizzard was about to become part of my world, I should have been professional, should have recused myself, but I couldn't. Because even then, some part of me knew I needed you in my life. Not just as an attorney, though you're brilliant at that, but as someone who saw through the ice and didn't run. Elena's tears were falling freely now. Ethan, one room, he said softly, echoing that first night. One blanket. One night, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since. I tried to keep my distance, tried to do the right thing, but here's what I've learned. The right thing isn't always the safe thing. Sometimes it's the terrifying thing, the thing that requires you to trust someone with all the parts of yourself you usually hide. He reached up, brushing away her tears with his thumb. I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable or open or any of the things relationships require. I'm going to mess up probably a lot, but I want to try with you, if you'll let me. Elena was quiet for a long moment, and Ethan felt every second like an eternity. Then she looked at the blanket on the bed back at him and smiled. That real, unguarded smile that made his entire world brighter. You recreated our terrible first night, she said. That's either the most romantic or most ridiculous thing anyone's ever done for me. Can it be both? It's definitely both, she laughed, then sobered. I'm scared, Ethan, of getting this wrong, of losing myself again in someone else's expectations. Then we make different rules, Ethan said. Not about staying apart, about staying ourselves while being together. You don't lose your edge, I don't lose my walls completely. We just make room for each other inside them. Elena stepped closer, closing the distance he'd maintained that first night. One room, one blanket, one night, she repeated. And then what? And then we figure it out, Ethan said. One day at a time. No pretending, no hiding. Just us being honest about what we want. And what do you want? He looked at her, really looked, the way he'd wanted to that first night but was too guarded to allow. You, all of you. The brilliant attorney who destroys opposing counsel. The woman who argues over taxis. The person who sees through corporate armor to whatever's underneath. I want all of it. That's a lot, Elena whispered, but she was smiling. You can handle it. She kissed him then, and it was nothing like that first night. No hesitation, no rules, no walls. Just two people choosing each other despite all the risks and complications. When they finally pulled apart, Elena glanced at the blanket and laughed. "Please tell me we're not actually sleeping under that thing. It's like 10 degrees outside." "There's a closet full of proper blankets," Ethan assured her. "I'm sentimental, not sadistic." They spent the night talking, sharing stories they'd held back, planning a future that felt both terrifying and inevitable. And when morning came, different from that first morning, warmer in every way, they didn't leave as strangers or even colleagues. They left as two people who'd found their way back to where it started, ready to write what came next. Together. So here's the real question this story leaves us with. How many opportunities for connection are you letting slip away because you're too busy protecting yourself from getting hurt? Elena and Ethan could have stayed strangers, could have kept their walls up, played it safe, avoided all the complications, and they would have been fine, professionally successful, personally lonely, forever wondering what if. But they didn't. They chose courage over comfort. They chose honesty over armor. And that choice? That's what transformed everything. Here's what I want you to think about tonight. What walls are you hiding behind? What connections are you avoiding? Because you're afraid of being vulnerable. Because here's the truth. The life you're protecting by staying safe might be the exact life that's keeping you small. Growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. Love doesn't happen behind walls. Real transformation requires you to take risks on people, on possibilities, on versions of yourself you haven't met yet. Maybe you're like Elena, rebuilding after something broke you, convinced that ambition and connection can't coexist. Or maybe you're like Ethan, so focused on control that you've forgotten what it feels like to let someone in. Either way, the lesson is the same. The person you're meant to become is waiting on the other side of the fear you're refusing to face. So I'm asking you directly, are you ready to stop playing it safe? Are you ready to choose growth over comfort, connection over protection, possibility over certainty? Because the stories that change your life don't come from doing what's easy. They come from doing what's terrifying and necessary. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think differently about walls and vulnerability and second chances, then do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Because we're not here for surface-level entertainment. We're here for stories that transform you, that challenge you, that remind you what's possible when you stop hiding and start living. More stories like this are coming and you won't want to miss them. Let's keep growing together.